gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
Let's talk about that.
Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're talking marketing lessons from Star Wars. With the help of our special guest, Infinidat CMO Eric Herzog. Eric, how are you?
Great. Well, thank you very much for including me, and always love talking to Caspian Networks.
That's we appreciate it, and Star Wars is one of my all-time films, something I talk about with my 14-year-old nephew on a weekly basis. Why the heck did you pick Star Wars to talk about today?
Well, I'm a mix. Half my career has been with giant global Fortune 500 high-tech companies, and the other half has been Star Wars type startups. So what happens in Star Wars? The small rebellion defeats the evil empire. So I've been the evil empire, IBM, EMC, which is now part of Dell, Seagate and Maxtor, which were both Fortune 500 companies in the hard drive business. But I've also been in all these startups, which is essentially the Rebel Alliance trying to defeat the evil empire. So I've lived both. So to me, Star Wars is an apropos analogy to use for marketing, particularly when you talk about what startups have to do to compete against the evil empire, or if you will, the Godzillas of the industry.
Amazing. And before we get into Star Wars, tell us about Infinidat and your work there as CMO.
Sure. So I'm the CMO Infinidat. I have all marketing functions, pretty standard in a small company. We're in the hundreds of millions. We're actually in the process of being acquired by Lenovo, which is a $70 billion multinational company that's headquartered jointly in North Carolina and Beijing. They are the number one provider of laptops in the world. Our solution, though, is very high-end enterprise storage. So the bulk of our customers are global Fortune 500. In fact, 28% of the Fortune 50 use our high-end enterprise storage technology. So that's what I do. In my past, I've also been head of sales. I've run product management, both in big and small companies. I've been the head of HR. I've even been a CFO. And I've been the head of manufacturing, supply chain, and operations 4 times as well. So when you're in the startup, you get to wear multiple hats. By the way, that's what the Jedi do, wear multiple hats all the time. So
That's
I
right.
fit right in from the startup side.
Meredith, what the heck is Star Wars?
So Star Wars is a classic case of an insane success story that almost didn't get made and hit every roadblock, including putting George Lucas in the hospital with chest pains because he was on the verge of a heart attack. So there's a lot going on there. But in the early 1970s, George Lucas, the director of Star Wars, had been talking with his friend and business partner, Gary Kurtz, about their idea for a space opera. And the initial idea was based on Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, who were both sci-fi superhero characters he loved as a kid. And there are tons of other pieces of inspiration he borrowed from, including this 1958 Japanese movie called The Hidden Fortress. It's about 2 peasants who agree to escort a man and a woman across enemy lines, only to find out he's a general and she's a princess. So you sort of see the connections there. The conflict between the Empire and the rebels was inspired by the Vietnam War. So he's taking from things that are going on in present day, his time. The Empire was a metaphor for the United States, and the rebels were sort of the Viet Cong. And he also included like this warning about sort of slipping into a dictatorship, which was him referencing the political climate under Nixon's presidency. He also used the idea of the hero's journey from mythologist Joseph Campbell, which we've talked about before on the show. And the idea for the force came from the concept of chi, or this sort of vital life force that flows through the body, which is an idea from Eastern philosophy or Chinese medicine. So if anyone's ever done like Tai Chi, it's sort of moving around that sort of life force. So he's drawing from all of these different places and building it into this script. And the script had several iterations. The first iteration, I feel like people who know Star Wars really wouldn't. They'd be like, this is so different from what it ends up actually being. So Luke Skywalker was originally this old grizzled general. Han Solo was an alien that was sort of like frog-like. And the Force he called the Bogan, and it was only 12 pages was their first script. And it was turned down by Universal and United Artists.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure everybody who read it was like, this is the worst thing ever.
It was really bad, and it was kind of all over the place. And it took 4 versions. So it wasn't until 1976. So like it took him like 6 years, right, to get to this version that was usable. And that's the one that they first started using when they started filming. It did end up getting picked up by Fox. But to go back a little bit, Star Wars probably never would have happened if it wasn't for American Graffiti, which was Lucas's previous film that cost him less than $1 million to make, but then it brought in $50 million at the box office, and it ended up being nominated for 5 Academy Awards. So it sort of gave him that credibility, that success to try something new. And then I wrote, he was a man with a vision. So Lucas said he had this idea, and he said it was really an experiment. I had to push the limits of the technology of the film medium in order to make this movie work. And of course, we see like a lot of characters basically like being built. He had all these ideas for like the visual effects. And so he ended up actually founding Industrial Light and Magic, or he calls it ILM, to handle his ideas for these visual effects for the movie. He also ends up laying off his original editing team, and he reassembles this new editing team because he wasn't happy with the pacing or the structure of the film. And budgeting was also a huge issue. Like they originally planned for $18 million as their budget, but they were only offered $7.5 million. And they did end up taking it. That was from Fox. And they started filming in 1976, and it was released the following year. But the first cut of the film was called unwatchable by basically everyone who saw it except Steven Spielberg. And then I wrote, what a guy.
What a
because
guy.
Yeah, he saw this sort of like vision. He thought there was potential there. And they basically ended up finishing it less than a week before it was supposed to be released. So there was tons of stuff that was very, very stressful. George Lucas really went through it to make this movie. The final budget did end up being $11 million. And the movie earned, and I've seen different numbers out there, but over $513 million in box offices worldwide. And that was sort of the original movie, A New Hope.
And by the way, that's like 60 million today.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so
500 million is 2.7 billion.
Jeez. That's so crazy. But so it ended up being a huge success. I kind of wonder, I mean, I'm sure he thinks it was worth it, but it was definitely like a huge physical toll for George Lucas. But curious, Eric, what you see in Star Wars as far as like marketing lessons we can take from it.
So the first one is business is a team sport. And the whole part of the Rebel Alliance was trying to assemble a team.
I'm a member of the Imperial Senate on a diplomatic mission to Alderaan.
You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take it away!
The evil empire created a team, but forced people to do it. In the case of the rebels, from all worlds all over the place, spearheaded by the Jedi, which also was an eclectic group, they basically brought together a team, and the team was then able to, be successful in the various movies, right, against the Empire, right? And then that's changed, obviously, in the more recent movies, right? And so every time they were able to win. And that was because they brought this eclectic group of different individuals and worked like a team. And that's what made them successful as the Rebel Alliance. And that's what makes a team successful, company successful. Business is a team sport. And in marketing, having all kinds of people running around with different functions is wrong. They all need to work together in what I call a completely vertically integrated marketing. Okay, so that PR and AR, and what you're doing with your channel, what you're doing with your website, what you're doing with the sales presentations that you use with customers, videos, all that stuff needs to work together as a team. And for smaller companies, since I've done so many startups, the way you are successful at beating the evil empire or beating the bigger global Fortune 500s, which I've done multiple times, both being the evil empire, but also being the rebel. And you beat them because you work together as a team. And that is a real value that people don't always believe in or don't get it. Business is a team sport. And I played baseball in high school and college. I also was a wrestler, which is an individual sport. It's a team sport. Everyone has to play their position. Everyone has to know what they're doing. Otherwise, you won't be successful. And that's what the Rebel Alliance did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point. And one of the big things, I don't know, have you watched Andor?
No, I've just seen every one of the Star Wars movies like 20 times, at least. If not, some I've seen at least 50 times.
Yeah, perfect. Well,
everyone, including the new ones.
There's one line in Andor, which I think, it's the precursor to A New Hope, and they mention, basically it's a bunch of the sort of like the bureaucrats sitting around a table, and they're basically like, hey, we have too much stuff going on. We're trying to like interrogate like thousands of people across like the entire galaxy at any given time. Like we don't have enough resources to do this. And it speaks to just like the sprawl of the empire and how big it is and how they have to snuff out the rebels, which are, coming from every single which direction, and how they just move so slowly and so methodically. But the sort of idea there is the Rebel Alliance is fighting on hope. It's like they're not trying to seek, centralized, they're trying to seek decentralized, the ability to just move way faster, make decisions faster, have decentralized thinking, although they have a centralized organization, but like not really, like they're not like really making huge decisions. And I mean, that's the thing is like startups, what you can do is you can move way faster. You can iterate way faster. They couldn't start building the Death Star and then change ideas halfway through. They've already built half the thing. Like they got to just stick with that. Whereas, the rebels can do a bunch of different things to try to make life miserable for the empire.
Well, the most successful big companies in overall functions, as well as in their marketing function, try to act like a startup. So for example, I was at IBM twice. They bought one of my startups. I was there for 3.5 years. And then IBM called me up back in 2015 and said, hey, we want you to come work for us again. I didn't reach out to them. They reached out to me. And then I was going through the interview process and I'm meeting with the IBM CMO at the time. And he said, the reason you're attracted to us is you're not a big company wonk. You're a hybrid. He goes, you've done Fortune 500 companies, including us, because you were at IBM before, but you came from a startup. That's how you came into IBM, was from a startup that we acquired. And you've also done startups. They've all been successful. And then you're also a hybrid because you've been a CRO, a VP of channel sales. You've done other functions. So we just don't want a marketing wonk. And that's exactly the word he used. And in the interviews with him and his senior VP, they said, we wanted someone like you on purpose. We wanted someone who combined them. So the rate of change and the way we did things when I was at IBM the second time was 15 times faster than they'd ever done it before. But they brought me in and they said, you do what you do. And so I did what I did and I treated it like a startup. Now, EMC was different. EMC never turned into a corporate bureaucracy, even though it was $27 billion at the time of Dell's acquisition. Now it has turned into one because a bunch of my team is still there. But EMC overall was built on the concept of a sports team. So they didn't care how old you were. They didn't care where you were freaking from. All they cared, how many home runs could you hit and how many touchdowns. And they didn't care what you looked like, and a lot of the company, particularly in the sales side, were a bunch of ex-college jocks, some of which had been really good college jocks, some of which sat on the bench, but they'd played college baseball, college football, college hockey, right? All over. And so they ran it kind of like a sports team, right? And that meant if you couldn't deliver anymore, you got cut. And if you could deliver, they didn't care. In fact, one of the guys who was there when I was there, is still at Dell, must be doing well. And I'm almost 70 years old. He's like 3 years older than I am. So he absolutely is 70, if not 70. And he's still there because he's hitting home runs still. So they don't care. Most big companies don't have that attitude. So EMC had certainly more bureaucracy than any startup did, but a lot less than the other big companies I've been at, particularly IBM. But IBM let me do my thing. And the whole point was to accelerate. Was it as fast as my startups? Absolutely not. But was it way faster than IBM's pace had ever been from a marketing perspective? Yes. And that's why, they brought me in, because I had that model, which is you got to act fast. You got lots of competition, right? I'm in the enterprise storage space, and it's dominated by a bunch of big gorillas, of which IBM at the time was the second biggest storage company on the planet. EMC was number one. But you had other competitors who were also big companies, HPE, right? Hitachi, right? Everybody's big. And but then you also had some startups you had to compete with too. So, it's fiercely competitive. And that means you got to move fast, and you got to do things like a sports team does. And like most sports teams, you have to work together. Otherwise, you don't win the World Series, you don't win the World Cup, you don't win the Super Bowl if you don't work together. And I'm a firm believer in that, and I've done that all the time. In fact, at Infinidat, I meet with a CRO every single Friday. I meet with his direct reports once a month. My direct reports meet with their equivalents. So the channel people, for example, meet with our channel team every week. So it's all about working together as a team. In this case, you still got to know what everyone's doing, because if you have a misstep, it's more likely now you're going to lose 5 planets because you didn't realize, we're over here doing this thing. And, because, it's a galaxy. So they're trying to attack over here on this thing, and they don't have any fighters, or they don't have any weapons, or they run out of food because they don't know what's going on. So when you're small like that, the level of coordination is rapid and fast, but it needs to be very precise so that everyone knows what's going on, because you don't have unlimited resources. You can't build the Death Star. You don't have the resources to do that. So you have to win other ways. And that means everyone's got to know what they're doing. The other thing I think you can take from the Rebel Alliance is, while not all of them were stars, they weren't all Han Solo, right? They weren't all Luke Skywalker. They weren't all Obi-Wan, or they weren't, of course, all my favorite Yoda. That said, everyone had very unique characteristics and were winners. And I would argue in a startup in particular, not only do you need the team, but you need to have winners. So in one of the movies I also love, which not part of this, but The Replacements, when the game is on the line, winners want the ball. So you need to have people who are like that. And quite honestly, there's nothing wrong with hiring people right out of college in the big companies. They got training programs, they got this, they got the other thing. In a startup, for me anyway, nobody learns on my watch. Nobody. So I only hire experienced people. And quite honestly, the side benefit is some of those experienced people can do the job of 2 people. So they can do the job of 2 people, and you have to pay them, for sake of argument, $150 a year, but you are going to hire 2 people at $100 a year, plus the stock. You just save the company money. Instead of $200,000 a year to get stuff done, you got someone who can really do 2 jobs for $150. And instead of having to dole out in a startup where stock is valuable, right, and is a valuable commodity to try to recruit people, instead of giving stock to 2 people, you give stock to 1. And you don't give that 1 person the same stock you would have given to the 2. So I call it the superstar factor, and you get a team of superstars that work together. And that's what you need in the startup, because you are facing, like the rebels did, the evil empire. And it's hard to beat the empire.
What else? Other B2B marketing takeaways from Star Wars?
I think the other thing that it is all about being able to be better. So let's take an example. You're doing a product launch. If you can't figure out why you're better than the Death Star, why what you're doing is better than the Death Star, then you're not going to win. Okay, the product won't be successful, won't be marketed successful, won't be sales successful. So from a marketing perspective, you've got to do like they did. You've got to figure out how is the way to win. In this case, in marketing, it'd be what's the message? Why is the product better? Why does it deliver better business or technical value, or both, quite honestly, is what I believe in. And that allows you to do what happened in Star Wars, right? Where those people had a message, they had a vision. So that message then goes to the sales team, to your channel partners if you use the channel, goes to the customers, and you win. And part of the way the Rebel Alliance won was the message. Freedom, right? That was their message. And we're going to let you live your lives, and you're not going to be oppressed. So there was a message around that. In fact, one of the things that, and I have a master's degree in Chinese history from the University of California. So one of the things when you go back to why did we lose the Vietnam War? Okay. And the real issue was not that we didn't have more weapons or more people or whatever it was than the Viet Cong did, but the Viet Cong went after the hearts and minds of the populace. Now, by the way, after the fact, did they screw the populace over? Heck yes, they did. But when the war was going on, when we would take over territory, When they would take over territory, they would set up schools, they would bring in fertilizer for the farmers. That wasn't always as much. And obviously, they didn't keep doing it once they took over the whole country. But in the short term, they won the hearts and minds of the populace. And the U.S. never did. And that's a big deal. Okay, so in Star Wars, the Rebel Alliance won the hearts and minds of the populace. The message. And then, of course, you need to be consistent. And Star Wars was always very consistent, right? Their message was consistent. The Rebel Alliance is about freedom and, of course, the evil empire, right, was not. And that's part of it as well. So you have the teamwork angle. You have the messaging angle. What's your story? How can you tell that story? How do you tell it effectively? And why is your story better than the Empire's? The Empire's story was, we give you peace. Not freedom, because peace is not freedom. Freedom is one thing, peace is another. And you want to have both. So the Empire is promising peace. Doesn't mean you're free. Doesn't mean they're not going to tell you what to do every day, and they're not going to try to brainwash you, but it is peaceful. Whereas the rebels were about freedom. So part of what you need to do in marketing is have the right message that resonates with your audience, just the way the Viet Cong won the war because they won the hearts and minds of the people. You need to win the hearts and the minds of your customers and your prospects and your channel and your sales team. And so that's something that it is a lesson from Star Wars, because that message is what resonated. And that's why people would help them, right? There are people who, in every one of those movies, there's somebody who's, well, it's not my thing. I'm not going to be involved. And then what happens? Right? In fact, remember, in the first movie, what happened? When he's talking to Obi-Wan, I'm Luke. I'm not getting involved in that, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's your uncle talking, without him knowing that, of course, he was the son of Darth Vader. But the whole point was, I can't get involved. And that theme is in almost every one of the movies where someone can't get involved. They can't help. It's in a whole bunch. It's in, obviously, the newer ones where Finn, as you remember, used to be with the Empire, right? And he pretends in that first new movie that he is, of course, with the Rebel Alliance, which he's not. And then once he's in, he tries to get out. In the first movie, remember, there's several scenes where he's trying to get out and goes, I just need to get away. I don't want to be involved. And then, of course, by the time the last one comes out, because that was also a trilogy, he's there helping them defeat, the replacement for the Empire, right? And you find out that the original Emperor is still alive, barely, right, as part of the theme. So that's the other thing, is you want to get people involved. And so that's, again, part of the message is how you win. And that's what you need to do. And that's a lesson from Star Wars that's directly applicable to marketing. What is your message? How effective is that message? By the way, when you're a startup, you might need to change the message if it's not effective, but you can't change it too much, because then you look like you don't know what you're doing, right? So you have to have consistent. And by the way, going back to my this tightly integrated marketing, that message needs to come through everything. Your data sheets, your solution briefs, your white papers, your videos, your PR, your public case studies, your presentations. You have to have that theme and message, and you don't want to vary from that. Now, sometimes you do country variations, okay, where you might say things a certain way in the US or Europe that when you're talking to a Japanese audience, you wouldn't, but it still needs to be the primary message. So what is your primary message? My storage does A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay. My software was A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And you can make minor variants for geographies, but still have to have that primary message. Otherwise, your product is really messed up because it can't be everything to everybody. Well, I think the other thing is the power of the people. Okay. When you're thinking about what you're doing on the startup marketing side, it's got to be the power of what you can deliver, even when you're outmanned and outgunned, which of course is one of the themes often in Star Wars. They're outmanned and outgunned, but they figure a way to win. Okay. So you need to be able to do that of the power of the people. Now in marketing, that's important because the power of the people is not just marketing. It's marketing and sales working together, marching down the drum. And part, again, the theme often of the Rebel Alliance is people from various planets of various cultures, various religions, various looks, right? So that, again, gets back to the team aspect of marketing, but also gets back to that consistency of message marketing and, the people all working together, which is, one of the key themes of all the Star Wars movies is that small core group. So very applicable for startup. But in many companies, even the global Fortune 500, sometimes marketing teams are surprisingly small, yet they're expected to output stuff for a $40 or $50 billion company. So you still need to have, in some of these big companies, a small team. And that small team needs to deliver the right things, which is all about, again, everybody working together, having a common message, having a completely integrated marketing thing. But all those elements is what made the Rebel Alliance win. That is how they defeated the Empire. Well, I think one of the key things is you always got to have hope. That was one of the other themes, obviously, that partial name of one of the movies. But the idea when you're on the startup side is your hope is you beat the big boys. You got to make sure you continue that hope. The other thing I think that you learn, especially from the Rebels, is they didn't always win. They lost. Remember, in the original 3 movies, in the second movie, they lose. The Empire wins. Then they come back, right, in the last of the original trilogy, and they defeat. Right, they destroy the Death Star. Right, the Emperor goes away. Darth Vader dies, although Darth Vader becomes a good guy at the very end and saves Luke's life. But again, they always had that hope. So you have to make sure that you try again. And in marketing, that could be applicable to big company too. So even at the big level, there's these wars that have to go on, and the marketing teams need to work together to combat both other big companies, and in certain industries, particularly in high tech, there's startups all over the place. That's not always true in other industries, but in high tech B2B, it doesn't matter what you are. Microsoft is a giant. Apple's a giant. Well, guess what? Startups try to go after a piece of their pie all the time. Most of the time, Apple and Microsoft crush them, or by the way, they buy them. Right? They buy them and absorb them, kind of like, to use a Star Trek analogy, like the Borg, who absorb everybody. So, even in big companies, you've got to have that hope. And that was part of, again, what Star Wars is all about. The hope, the rebels would always win. And you got to, again, try again. There are times in all of those movies, in the 9 of them, right? In the one where Darth Vader becomes Darth Vader, right? Where he's Anakin. And then, of course, at the end, he fights Obi-Wan. And that one, essentially, the Emperor wins, right? Because almost all the Jedi are killed, and the few that are left are dispersed, right? And the baby of Anakin and Princess Leia have to be separated so that they won't be discovered by, the Empire. So in all of those movies, the rebels did not always win, both within a single movie and absolutely there are certain movies where it's clear the Empire is the winner, not the rebels. So again, it's about teamwork. It's about, again, that messaging, right? And them to rally the people, which is what marketing messaging is rallying your team, including the sales teams in particular, your channel partners for those products that are sold through channels, and most importantly, the end users, right? If they don't buy, there is no company. That's the reality, right? So it's still about achieving a goal. And of course, with the Rebel Alliance, that goal was to continually beat the Empire.
I feel like we could go all day, Eric. For Infinidat, what's your marketing strategy and how content fits in?
So again, it's all reinforced, and again, continually having marketing that's fully integrated. So our content strategy includes video, We consider the web content. It's just a different way to deliver that content. We have data sheets still. Of course, now they're PDF. You don't print them like you used to in the old days. We have white papers. We have solution briefs. We use public blogging, and which we use social media. So we try to do all of that content in an integrated fashion with a common message. So, for example, last year we won 35 awards for our solutions or people. Okay. So we won an award, press release. We have an award deck. We win an award. Oh, guess what? The logo from whoever gave us the award, the analyst or the press. Oh, it's a flyover in the end user presentation. Okay. It's mentioned on the data sheets. It's on the website. It's talked about in videos all the time by me. So I just did a video which just came out from what's called the Cyber Tribe, and it's all about cybersecurity. And in that video, I talked about how our InfiniSafe technology, which is cyber technology for a high-end enterprise storage that helps you with malware and ransomware, that's what its function is. I clearly said in that video that InfiniSafe had won 18 awards in the last year and a half, which was exactly true. So again, using that from a content perspective. So all that stuff needs to work together, and it's all about reinforced and integrated marketing. And a lot of companies don't do it. So they'll win an award, nobody knows about it. Okay. Or the videos have different messaging from what's in a solution brief for the data sheets. Okay. So someone reads something and someone watches something, goes, wait, they're not saying the same. What's wrong with these guys? Or does it really do two things? And if it doesn't do two things, so if someone buys it because they think it does two things and it doesn't, they're going to send it back. Right. Or they won't buy because during the buy process, they'll figure it out. So it's very, very important from that perspective that the content that you use and leverage, it's across. Okay. You need to make sure you don't lose the message. Again, now thinking from a small company perspective, you can't lose the message when you go into the geos, right? So when you're translating, right? And that sometimes can be a problem, right? So you got to make sure you can handle that. When you're a big company, which is not us, but having been at IBM twice and EMC, which is now part of Dell, the real issue there is sometimes the people in the geos want to do their own messaging. And so then you lose the juice. Okay. And that's a problem. Okay. So you have to make sure that you enforce that. But all that comes back to having all the content with consistent messaging, right? Making sure you're reinforcing the messaging from your PR to your analyst deck, to your end user deck, to your press deck, to your videos, to your webinars, to the seminars you do in the field, to every trade show you go. What's your message at the trade show in the booth, right? Both when you're talking to prospects or existing customers, and even just the booth paneling, right? All that consistency is what you really need from a content perspective, especially in a small company, but I'd argue even in a big company.
Eric, it's been awesome having you on the show. For our listeners, go check out Infinidat. Congratulations on the exciting news about Lenovo. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
Well, I think the big thing is business is a team sport, and the sub-team of marketing as part of the business is a team sport too. So if you use the offensive lineman analogy in American football, because it's great, are you passing or are you running? So again, business is a team sport. Marketing is one of those sub-teams, and marketing itself needs to be a team within it. And I think that is a critical thing. And for those of you that are in startups listening to this thing, if you don't work as a team, the empire will crush you. So you need to be like the Rebel Alliance and all work together.
Amazing. Eric, thanks again. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk soon. Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.